Have you ever wondered, what if time itself didn't move forward, but flowed backward instead? Imagine watching the world unravel in reverse rivers, returning to their sources, leaves climbing back onto trees, stars gathering closer in the night sky. What would our lives mean if every goodbye became a reunion, and every ending a beginning? Tonight, let's drift together into this question, not to find a final answer, but to explore the wonder, the beauty, and the mystery it holds. If you love journeys of imagination like this one, where science meets reflection and curiosity turns into calm storytelling, make sure to subscribe to Beyond Our Dawn. Join our growing community, where every night we explore questions that open the heart and quiet the mind. Imagine lying down in your bed, the weight of the day slowly slipping away, your breathing steady, the room dim and quiet. The world outside fades until all that remains is the rhythm of your chest rising and falling. In this stillness, a thought drifts into your mind, soft and curious, like a feather carried by the night air. What if time did not flow forward, but instead ran in reverse? It is not a question that demands an answer tonight, nor is it one that science can settle neatly. It is the kind of question that hangs in the air like mist, one you can touch with your imagination but never quite capture with your hands. And yet, even in its mystery, it has the power to lull the restless mind into wonder. Time, as we usually understand it, is a one-way road. We wake in the morning, we move through the hours, and by night we arrive at a place we cannot return from. Our memories stretch behind us, our possibilities extend ahead. But what if that road reversed? What if, every time the clock ticked, it pulled us gently backward, step by step, moment by moment, retracing our own footprints in the sand of existence? The familiar rhythm of dawn to dusk would remain, but the direction would be reversed. The sun would still rise and set, but instead of carrying us forward into tomorrow, it would carry us softly back into yesterday. Science often explains this one-way motion with entropy, the gradual increase of disorder in the universe. A shattered cup does not reassemble itself. Smoke rising from a candle does not funnel back into the wick. The arrow of time, scientists tell us, is bound to this increase in disorder. But in the stillness of your mind tonight, imagine the impossible. Imagine the shards of porcelain trembling, sliding across the floor, pulling themselves together until the cup stands whole in your hand again. Imagine smoke folding back into the candle's flame. Would it feel like magic, or simply the way life has always been in a reversed world? Close your eyes and let that image play like a film in reverse, smooth and silent, strangely satisfying in its orderliness. In such a world, your own life would not begin with birth and end with death. Instead, you would awaken into old age, fragile and wise, and with each passing day, strength would return to your limbs, the lines on your face would fade, your hair would darken. Your memories would not be built as you go along, but would already exist, waiting for you to step into them. You would grow younger and smaller, retreating into the safety of childhood, until one day you would lie in a cradle, shrinking further still until you quietly dissolve into the nothingness before existence. In this inverted life, every ending would be a beginning, and every farewell a kind of greeting. What would it mean for love, for joy, for grief? If you met someone new, would it feel like recognition? Would goodbyes be softer if you knew that one day they would become first hellos? Imagine watching your loved ones grow closer and closer to you as time folds them back into your life, instead of carrying them farther away. It is a tender thought, bittersweet, like a melody played backwards, strange at first, but still carrying the essence of its beauty. Think about memory itself. In the forward flow of time, memory is our anchor to the past, but in reverse, memory would act like a window into the future. You would know what was coming, not as surprise, but as inevitability. Would that certainty bring peace, or would it drain life of its flavor? After all, so much of our joy comes from anticipation, from not knowing what tomorrow will bring. In a world of reversed time, tomorrow would already be written, and yesterday would be the blank page. Perhaps there would be comfort in that, like reading a familiar story backward, already aware of every twist and turn, but discovering a different kind of poetry in the unraveling. Even the simple act of breathing takes on new meaning when you imagine time reversed. Instead of air leaving your lungs, it would return, filling you, restoring you. A sigh would no longer release tension, but gather it back. Every heartbeat would not push blood forward, but pull it in, rewinding the rhythm of life. Your body itself would become an instrument of reversal, each cell unbreaking, each injury healing in an instant as though it had never occurred. Pain would not linger. It would evaporate backward into nothing. But perhaps the most curious thing of all would be how we perceive purpose. In our normal sense of time, we live towards something, goals, milestones, the vague horizon of the future. In reversed time, purpose would not be ahead of you, but behind, already achieved, already completed, waiting for you to rediscover it. The story of your life would be less about striving and more about remembering. Every moment would be a return rather than a step forward. That idea alone carries a strange calm, as if striving were replaced by acceptance, as if the world itself whispered, there is nothing to reach for because you are already there. And so, as you lie here tonight, breathing gently, let yourself drift into this imagined river of reversed time. See yourself not being pushed forward into the unknown, but carried back, gently, into the familiar. Each moment pulling you closer to where you have already been, each breath stitching the tapestry of your life in reverse. It does not matter if it makes sense scientifically. Tonight is not for proofs or arguments. Tonight is for wonder, for resting in the soft space between questions and answers, for listening to the hush of time itself and imagining what it would feel like if it flowed not toward tomorrow, but back into yesterday, again and again, until the edges blur and you are finally at peace. Time has always been one of our deepest mysteries. We measure it with clocks and calendars. We divide it into hours and seasons. But no matter how precisely we try to capture it, it always slips through our fingers. Scientists call it a dimension. Philosophers call it a river. Poets call it a dream. Whatever name we give, we all know the sensation of being carried along by its current. Yet, if we pause tonight, if we let our minds step gently aside from habit, we can imagine that current flowing the other way. To feel what it would be like if the arrow of time bent in physics. The arrow of time is often tied to something called entropy. Entropy is a measure of disorder, a measure of how mixed up and scattered things become. If you pour cream into coffee, the two swirl together until they are inseparable. If you drop a vase, it shatters into many pieces. These changes seem permanent. You do not see cream and coffee separating on their own. You do not see shards of porcelain sliding across the floor to rebuild a vase. The increase of entropy marks the passage of time. It is why we feel time moving forward, why memory stacks up behind us. But now, close your eyes and try to flip that script. Picture a cup resting broken on the ground, then watch as the pieces vibrate, rise, and gently press themselves together. Listen as the cracking sounds turn smooth and whole. Feel the wonder of watching disorder retreat into order, as though the universe itself were a film running backward. If the laws allowed it, if entropy decreased instead of increased, this might be the everyday rhythm of existence. To us, it seems impossible. But in this gentle thought experiment, impossibility is not a barrier. It is an invitation. If time flowed backward, even the stars above would follow a different choreography. Supernovas, instead of exploding outward in dazzling bursts of light, would gather their fragments, their gas and dust collapsing neatly into glowing spheres, shrinking until they return to quiet stars. Planets would drift closer to their suns, atmospheres becoming thicker, oceans pulling vapor back from the sky until every drop of rain returns to the sea. The very cosmos itself would be rewinding, step by step, like a grand orchestra playing its final notes first and then moving slowly back to silence. And in the midst of that cosmic rewinding, we would live our lives in reverse as well. Imagine watching the pages of your own story turn backward. You would begin with a full book, every chapter written, every character already known. Each day you would turn to an earlier page, reliving moments you once thought were gone, now arriving. Again, with clarity and calm, there would be no surprises, no sudden twists, only the gentle assurance that the story is unfolding back toward its beginning. For some, this might seem dull, like watching a film in reverse. But for others, it might be deeply comforting, like returning home after a long journey. Think of all the small things that would change. A candle would not melt, but grow taller as the wax climbs back into place. Food would not be eaten, but emerge whole again, each bite returning from your mouth to your plate. Conversations would unspool in reverse, words moving from ears back to lips, laughter folding itself away until silence returns. Even music would play backward, strange and haunting, yet still carrying hints of its beauty, like echoes in a dream. To live in reverse would be to live in constant undoing, where every action is not a step into the unknown, but a step back into the known. What would happen to our emotions in such a world? Joy, as we know it, often comes from the anticipation of something new, a trip, a meeting, a surprise gift. But in a reversed world, joy might come from the gentle familiarity of revisiting what was once lost. Grief, too, would change its shape. Instead of mourning when someone leaves, you would feel the quiet hope of knowing they will arrive again. Every goodbye would contain the promise of a future hello. Every loss would carry within it the certainty of return. It might not erase sadness, but it would soften it, wrapping sorrow in inevitability and care. Memory itself becomes a curious puzzle when time runs backward. Right now, memory is like a photograph album, always showing us what has already passed. But in reverse time, memory would become a glimpse of what lies ahead. You would recall tomorrow, before it happened, not as a prophecy but as a certainty. The shape of your days would be known before you lived them. Imagine the peace of no longer wondering what will come, of walking with complete confidence into each moment because it has already been placed in your mind. Yet, at the same time, imagine the dullness that might settle in when there are no surprises, no adventures waiting beyond the horizon. Would certainty bring calm, or would it dim the spark that makes life thrilling? Perhaps, in this reversed world, meaning itself would transform. Instead of striving for goals, instead of pushing ourselves toward progress, we would rest in the act of rediscovery, Success would not be about reaching new heights, but about walking gently down familiar steps. Life would be less a race and more a return, less about ambition and more about acceptance. And perhaps that is not so strange after all. Even now, when we move forward in time, so much of our joy comes not from what is new, but from what we remember, what we revisit, what we hold close. In a backward flow of time, memory and meaning would merge into one, carrying us softly into what we have already known. As you drift further into this thought, let yourself feel the calm that such a reversal brings. No more racing toward the future, no more anxiety about what lies ahead. Only the gentle movement back, each moment carrying you into a place you have already touched, each step returning you home. There is a rhythm to it, like a lullaby, steady and soothing, carrying you deeper into rest. The universe itself rocking you, not forward into uncertainty, but backward into familiarity. The hush of time wrapping around you like a blanket, warm and protective. As you close your eyes and let sleep carry you away, if you let yourself drift deeper into this reversed world, you might begin to notice how the very fabric of daily life changes. Time, which normally feels like a constant push forward, would now be a gentle pull backward. Every action you take would not be a step into something unknown, but a return to something already familiar, already written into the pages of existence. It would be like walking through a garden where every flower has already bloomed, and your steps simply guide you back through blossoms you once admired. There is a peculiar comfort in that thought, a sense of safety in knowing that nothing lies ahead that you have not already encountered. The future would be less a question and more a memory, soft and certain, unfolding with every breath. Science tells us that time is not just a measure of clocks and calendars, but something woven into the universe itself, a dimension alongside space. Just as we move left and right, up and down, we move through time. But unlike space, where we can turn and face any direction, time seems to offer us only one path forward. This path is guided by entropy, the slow drift from order to disorder, from neatness to messiness. But in our imagined world, entropy would shrink instead of grow. Chaos would collapse back into simplicity. The shattered would be made whole. Disorder would quietly fold into order like sheets being tucked back onto a bed. Picture ice melting in a glass on a summer day. In our world, the ice shrinks and water spreads. In a reversed world, the water would gather itself back into a cube, clear and cold, rising from the liquid until it stands tall again. Or imagine ashes from a burned piece of paper. Instead of scattering into the air, they would come together, reforming into a crisp sheet, ink lines straightening into words as though the story had never been lost. The entire physical world would carry a rhythm of renewal, of unbreaking, of return. Each small reversal would be a reminder that nothing is gone forever, is only on its way back to where it began. But what would it feel like to live in such a world? Imagine eating a meal in reverse. Food does not disappear bite by bite, but returns piece by piece to your plate, and then back to the kitchen, and then back into raw ingredients, waiting to be combined again. Imagine drinking water and feeling it rise from your stomach into your glass, cool and clear, untouched. Imagine speaking with someone and hearing your words flow back from their ears into your lips, until silence settles and no word has ever been spoken. Would these acts feel natural, or would they feel uncanny, like watching a film rewind too quickly? Over time, perhaps they would feel ordinary, just the way things have always been. our minds are skilled at adapting. We learn the rules of our world as children, and in a backward-flowing world, we would simply learn those rules in reverse. Even the simplest motions would take on a new beauty. Tears would not fall, but rise back into your eyes. Leaves would not drop from trees, but lift gently back onto branches, fresh and green again. Rivers would not run to the sea, but seas would pour back into rivers, climbing upstream to their mountain sources. Rain would not descend from clouds, but climb into them, drop by drop, until the sky was full and heavy, waiting to release again. Every act of nature would be a quiet rebuilding, a choreography of restoration instead of decay. Life would still move, still change, but always toward wholeness, always toward beginnings instead of endings. And what of our bodies in this reverse tide? We would feel aches fade instead of appear. Injuries would close before our eyes, scars softening, broken bones aligning themselves in silence. Sickness would be undone, cells returning to health as though they had never faltered. The act of aging itself would become a kind of healing, each year leaving us stronger, more energetic, more alive. Wrinkles would smooth, muscles would strengthen, hair would regain its color. We would meet our parents as elders and watch them grow younger each day until we all meet again in childhood. Generations would not separate by time but converge, collapsing back into the same points of origin. Life would become a spiral that always winds inward, closer to the core. The psychological effect of such a life is difficult to imagine, right? Now, our sense of purpose comes from striving, from moving forward, from hoping and working toward goals. But in reverse, purpose would not be about reaching new places, but about returning to old ones. Instead of ambition, we would cultivate reflection. Instead of chasing the future, we would embrace the past as it approached us, knowing it would arrive whether we longed for it or not. What would ambition mean if everything we once achieved was already behind us, waiting to be rediscovered? Would we still dream, or would we simply remember? Perhaps in a reversed world, dreaming would not be about what is to come, but about recalling what once was, savoring it as it circles back into our hands. There is a strange comfort in this idea, too. Think of how much of our worry comes from uncertainty, from not knowing what tomorrow will hold. In a backward world, that uncertainty would be erased. Every tomorrow is already known, already lived. Anxiety would dissolve, because nothing can surprise you. At the same time, spontaneity might vanish. Every moment would unfold as expected, every event inevitable. But perhaps this would shift our focus. Instead of seeking novelty, we might seek depth. Instead of looking outward, we might look inward, cherishing the textures of moments we already know. A conversation would not be valuable because it was new, but because of the comfort it carried, the reassurance of its return. As you let these thoughts settle in your mind, notice how they soothe rather than disturb. There is no rush in this backward flow, no pressure to keep up. The river of time carries you whether you struggle or not. All you need to do is drift, to allow yourself to be pulled gently toward beginnings. Each moment is not a cliff dropping away behind you, but a shore you are approaching once more. You are not running out of time, you are returning to it. And in that return, there is a softness, a calm that seeps into your bones, quieting the restlessness that forward time so often stirs. And so tonight, as the minutes pass, let yourself imagine the world unraveling gently, stitch by stitch. The candle regains its wax, the river climbs toward its spring. Your own body grows lighter with each breath, as though sleep itself were a kind of reversal, carrying you back toward innocence. The arrow of time bends, not into tomorrow, but into yesterday, and in that bending, you find rest. If you allow your imagination to linger a little longer in this reversed world, you might begin to notice how deeply it touches not only the physical order of things, but also the way we feel, the way we relate to one another, and the way we understand ourselves. Time flowing backward would change the very rhythm of human life, not just in the surface details, but in the most intimate spaces of the heart. It is easy to picture broken objects repairing themselves or rivers climbing uphill, but what about love, friendship, longing, and memory? What about the fragile bonds that tie us to one another, and the way those bonds shift across years? In a reversed world, would those connections feel stronger, softer, or entirely different? Imagine meeting someone for the first time, but in truth, it would be the last time you see them in the normal flow of events. In reversed time, your first meeting is really a farewell, and your goodbye is actually your beginning. Conversations would fold back into silence, laughter would soften back into anticipation, and even the touch of a hand would retreat into the space just before it was ever reached out. There is something tender in this image, something that feels almost safer than our own reality. Instead of losing people as time moves forward, you would regain them as it moves back. Loved ones you thought were gone forever would return, slowly and gently, growing closer with each passing day. Death would not be an end, but a prelude to reunion. Grief would unravel itself like a ribbon wound backward onto its spool. And what of the milestones of life, graduations, weddings, farewells, achievements? In reverse, each would transform into something new. The pride of a graduation would soften into years of learning undone, knowledge slipping quietly back into books. A wedding would dissolve into long months of courtship, then back into the thrill of first glances, until the two people finally walk away as strangers again. The sadness of departure would carry within it the promise that one day the person will return, step by step, until they stand once again at the threshold of your life. Achievements would not be goals accomplished, but steps retraced, successes dissolving into effort, effort dissolving into desire, until what remains is only the dream of possibility. Perhaps in this way, life would feel less like climbing a mountain and more like gently descending it, rediscovering each stone as you go. It is strange to think about identity in this kind of world. Right now, we build ourselves piece by piece, day by day, adding experiences, memories, choices. We are accumulations of forward time. But in reverse, we would shed layers instead of adding them. Who we are would not be the result of growth, but of ungrowth, a peeling back, a returning. Every mistake would be undone, every scar would fade, every burden would be lifted. It is tempting to imagine that as a kind of liberation, but would it also erase the depth we gain from struggle? Would we lose the richness that comes from learning, from facing hardship and surviving it? Or would that richness be preserved in some other form, hidden in the act of remembering what we are returning to? Think about childhood in this world. Instead of a place you leave behind, it would be the place you are always moving toward. The innocence and wonder of youth would not fade, but slowly approach. Each day would bring you closer to curiosity, to openness, to the joy of discovery. Imagine how differently you might see your days if you knew they were carrying you toward a smaller, simpler version of yourself. The worries of adulthood would fade. Responsibilities would dissolve. Even the concept of guilt might vanish, because every wrong action would be undone as you move backward, each harm repaired, each wound healed. Childhood would not be a memory you long for, but a destination waiting patiently for you, and birth itself. What would that mean in a reversed timeline? We think of birth as a beginning, the moment we step into life. But in reverse, it would be the final moment, the quiet conclusion of the journey. To arrive in a cradle would not be to start, but to finish, to end not with sorrow but with the soft release into nothingness, into the mystery before existence. Death and birth would trade places, one becoming the other. The great fear of our forward world, death, would be softened, transformed into the knowledge that it is simply the start of the return, the doorway into reunion, into restoration, into becoming once more. This reshaping of life's milestones raises questions about purpose. In our normal world, purpose often feels tied to what lies ahead. Careers, relationships, creations, legacies. We are always reaching for something, climbing toward something not yet attained. But in reverse, purpose would not be about reaching, but about retracing. The meaning of life would not come from what we build, but from what we gently return to. Perhaps that would free us from the anxiety of ambition. Perhaps it would shift our gaze from the horizon to the present, from striving to simply experiencing. If tomorrow is already known, then today is all there is, all that matters. The pressure to achieve might vanish, replaced by the desire to savor. And yet, there is a paradox hidden here. If everything is inevitable, if every step backward is already mapped, then what becomes of choice? Would free will vanish? Would we still feel responsible for what we do, if we know it will be undone? In a backward flowing world, maybe responsibility itself would take on a new shape. Perhaps it would not be about consequences, but about awareness. Not about what we change, but about how we experience the changes. We might not control the flow of time, but we could still choose how to see it, how to embrace it, how to rest within it. And maybe that choice, how we meet the inevitable, is all the freedom we truly need. The longer you imagine this backward flow, the more you may notice how gentle it feels. Forward time can sometimes feel harsh, like a tide pulling you toward an uncertain future, toward aging, toward loss. But backward time is soft, carrying you back toward familiarity, toward reunion, toward simplicity. Each step is not a departure, but a homecoming. Each breath is not a loss, but a restoration. Even as you lie here now, in your bed, you can almost feel it, as though sleep itself were a rehearsal for reverse time. Every night we surrender, every night we dissolve into unconsciousness, and every morning we return. Sleep is a tiny backward tide, a nightly reminder that time is not as rigid as it seems. So, as the world grows quiet around you, let your mind wander into this reversed existence. Picture the people you love moving closer instead of farther. Picture your body growing lighter instead of heavier. Picture your worries unwinding thread by thread until nothing is left but calm. In this world of backward time, there is no rushing, no scarcity, no fear of what comes next. There is only return, only restoration, only rest. And that rest is already beginning to settle over you, like the soft weight of a blanket, pulling you back, back, back into peace. The more deeply you let yourself imagine this reversal, the more it becomes clear that time is not only about clocks and calendars, but about the way we feel and experience the world. It shapes our memories, our expectations, our sense of who we are. In a forward-flowing world, we live with uncertainty. We look ahead and wonder, worry, anticipate. But in a reversed world, that uncertainty dissolves, replaced by a quiet certainty that tomorrow is simply yesterday, waiting patiently for us to arrive again. That certainty might feel like a kind of balm, soothing the restless questions that so too often keep us awake at night. Think for a moment about how history itself would appear in reverse. Wars would not begin with fear and end with devastation. Instead, battlefields would heal themselves, weapons would vanish from hands. Soldiers would retreat step by step until they are home again, and peace would quietly expand across nations. Cities reduced to rubble in forward time would rise brick by brick, smoke gathering back into chimneys, shattered glass lifting into windows whole again. Every destruction would be undone, every loss slowly restored. We would not tell stories of rise and fall, but of fall and rise, of ruin unwinding into harmony. Imagine the relief of watching history's tragedies not unfold, but fold back into themselves until only calm remains. Even the great events of nature would change their character. Volcanoes would not erupt but quietly pull lava back into their craters. Hurricanes would not sweep across coastlines but unravel into gentle breezes, their clouds dispersing upward into the sky. Forests destroyed by fire would heal before our eyes, flames retreating into sparks, sparks folding into embers, embers vanishing into unburned wood. Extinctions would run backward into reappearances. Creatures long gone would step back onto the stage of life, their species returning one by one, until the earth is teeming again with the diversity it once held. The deep history of the planet itself would become an act of restoration, the long erosion of mountains undone, the slow decay of coral reefs reversed. The earth would not age but rejuvenate, not wear down but renew. And what of the cosmos itself? Imagine the night sky in a backward flow of time. Stars would not burn out but grow brighter, larger, fuller. Galaxies would not drift apart but inch closer together, gathering into clusters, into singular, radiant masses. The great expansion of the universe would become a great contraction, everything drawing inward, gently, toward unity. Instead of wondering how it all began, we would be watching how it all returns. Cosmologists sometimes call this idea the Big Crunch, the opposite of the Big Bang. But in our backward-flowing dream, it is not an end but a natural return, the universe closing its eyes after a long day, folding itself back into silence. For us, in the middle of it, the experience would be strange but oddly peaceful. We would not be explorers pushing outward into the unknown, but travelers making our way home. Every discovery would become a rediscovery. Every invention would unravel itself back into the curiosity that first sparked it. Think about technology in this reversed world. Computers would not emerge from laboratories but dissolve back into wires, then into raw minerals. Airplanes would land at their destinations, but instead of boarding, passengers would quietly leave them behind, planes disassembling back into factories, factories into ores. Progress itself would look like regression, but regression would feel like a gentle return. In such a world, perhaps we would value not the novelty of invention, but the beauty of uninvention, of simplicity slowly reasserting itself. Consider how our relationships with one another would change. In forward time, we often cling to the present because we know it will pass. We say goodbye with heavy hearts because we know parting is permanent. But in a reversed world, parting is never the end. You know with certainty that every separation is temporary, that those you lose will return to you, step by step, until they are by your side once more. A final embrace would not be final, but the beginning of closeness renewed. Perhaps this would change the way we love. Perhaps we would love with less fear, less desperation, because reunion is guaranteed. Or perhaps we would love more deeply, savoring every step of the return, knowing how precious each moment feels when it arrives again. The very concept of memory becomes slippery in this world. In forward time, memory is a record of what has already happened. But in reverse, memory would show us what lies ahead, what is waiting just around the bend. You would remember tomorrow before it comes, not as a guess but as a certainty. This could feel like a blessing, freeing us from anxiety. Yet it could also feel like a cage, stripping away surprise. Would we miss the thrill of not knowing? Would we long for uncertainty as much as we now long for certainty? Or would we find a different kind of joy in anticipation, not of the unknown, but of the familiar returning? Perhaps in this world, comfort replaces excitement, predictability replaces chaos, and in the quiet hours of night, that comfort might feel like exactly what we need. It is worth asking, too, how this reversed flow would shape our sense of responsibility. In forward time, we act knowing our choices shape the future. Our mistakes have consequences. Our efforts can change what comes next. But in reverse, if the future is already written, if tomorrow is already yesterday, what does it mean to choose? Would morality vanish, or would it transform? Perhaps in such a world, responsibility would not be about changing outcomes, but about how we experience them. Even if we cannot alter the flow, we can still choose the way we walk through it, the way we see it, the way we open our hearts to it. And maybe that is the essence of freedom, even in forward time. Not control over events, but control over perspective as you lie here. Letting these images flow through your mind, notice the softness they bring. The idea of backward time carries with it a gentleness, a release from striving, a calm assurance that nothing is truly lost. Everything returns, everyone returns, the world itself returns. It is not a story of endings, but of endless beginnings, of cycles closing only to open again. In the hush of night, that thought can be as comforting as a lullaby. You do not need to solve the paradox. You do not need to prove the physics. You only need to drift with it, to let the river carry you, not forward into worry, but backward into peace. And as your eyes grow heavy, you can imagine that you are already there in that reversed current. Your thoughts fold back into silence. Your breath folds back into stillness. Sleep itself is like a small rehearsal for reverse time, a nightly undoing of the day, a gentle return to innocence. Let yourself drift, slowly and quietly, back, 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 into the calm that waits for you. If you let the thoughts stretch further, you might begin to see how a reversed flow of time would change not only history or the cosmos, but the very way we feel about ourselves in the present moment. Time has always been the silent framework of our lives, invisible yet unavoidable. We rarely stop to notice it, except when it seems to run too fast or too slow. We celebrate birthdays as marks of forward progress. We count anniversaries as evidence of enduring bonds. We measure our accomplishments by the years it took to achieve them. All of this is possible because we assume time carries us forward. But in a world where it carries us backward, these markers would transform into something entirely new. And with that transformation would come a change in the way we live each day. Consider birthdays in reverse. Instead of adding candles each year, you would remove them. the cake slowly losing its burden of fire. Friends would not gather to say, "You are older, wiser, further along the journey," but rather, "You are younger now, closer to where you began." Age would not be a climb upward, but a gentle descent, and perhaps we would view it not with fear, but with delight. After all, so much of the sadness in forward time comes from knowing we are leaving youth behind. In reverse, youth would always be waiting, approaching, promising to meet us again. Each birthday would bring us closer to laughter, to innocence, to the carefree wonder of childhood. Work and careers would also look different. In our world, we begin with learning, then apply that learning, then slowly retire. In reverse, we would start with retirement, full of leisure, and gradually move into years of expertise. Skills would fade, responsibilities would loosen, and eventually we would step back into classrooms, returning to the role of student. The final stage of work would not be the exhaustion of adulthood, but the openness of childhood curiosity. Imagine the relief of finishing a lifetime of labor only, to move backward into years where play is the only expectation. In such a world, perhaps stress itself would dissolve, because the burden is always lifting, not increasing. Love, too, would carry a different rhythm. A couple together for 50 years in forward time celebrates endurance. In reverse time, that same couple would know with certainty that each day brings them closer to their first spark, to the excitement of falling in love. Instead of longing for the passion of the past, they would feel it approaching, step by step, as they walk backward together. Arguments would fade into harmony, misunderstandings would dissolve into laughter, distance would shrink into closeness. Every shared moment would be not a memory but a promise, waiting just ahead. Love would not be about holding on, but about watching it gently return. Think of childhood friendships. In forward time, we grow apart as lives diverge. But, in reverse, we grow closer. School friends who drift away in adulthood would slowly return. Strangers would become familiar. Acquaintances would become companions. Companions would become inseparable friends, until one day you meet for the first time, which is really the last. That final moment, instead of being tinged with sadness, would glow with the beauty of beginnings. The circle of connection would not break, but would rewind itself endlessly. It is tempting to think this reversed life would be perfect, but it is not without paradox. What about learning itself? If we grow from wisdom to innocence, do we lose the insights we once held? In forward time, mistakes teach us lessons. In reverse, lessons would unravel into mistakes, clarity into confusion. We would watch ourselves, become less experienced, less aware, less capable of understanding complexity. Would that be painful, or would it feel like freedom? To be unburdened by too much knowledge, to return to simplicity, to see the world again with wide, unknowing eyes. There is beauty in that too. The joy of discovery would not come from chasing what is new, but from rediscovering what you had forgotten. Even memory would feel like a dream. Imagine closing your eyes and remembering not what happened yesterday, but what will happen tomorrow. You wake already knowing the conversations you will have, the places you will visit, the faces you will see. It is not prediction, not hope, but certainty. And when those moments arrive, they are not surprises, but fulfillments, familiar yet still alive. Some might say this would rob life of its spark, but perhaps it would change the way we savor moments. Instead of excitement, we would find comfort. Instead of thrill, we would find peace. Each moment would be like hearing a favorite song played again, no less beautiful for its familiarity, no less powerful because you knew each note, And so, day by day, we would walk backward into younger years, returning slowly toward childhood, toward the first sounds, the first sights, the first sensations of life. Our final steps would not be heavy with regret or fear, but light with the promise of beginning again. Birth itself would not be an opening door, but a closing one, a soft transition into the silence before existence. In such a world, death would lose its power. It would no longer be the wall we dread, but a gateway into restoration. As you rest tonight, let this image settle over you. Picture yourself not moving forward into age, but backward into youth. Feel your worries fade, your burdens lift, your body growing lighter with each breath. The weight of tomorrow dissolves, because tomorrow is already known. The pain of yesterday heals, because yesterday is still waiting to meet you. The river of time flows in reverse, carrying you gently back toward beginnings. And in that current, you are safe, you are at peace. You are held by the quiet certainty that nothing is lost forever. Everything waits for you just ahead, in the gentle embrace of yesterday. As the idea of time flowing backward deepens in your imagination, it begins to reshape even the smallest, most ordinary parts of life. The familiar rhythm of waking and sleeping, of eating and speaking, of working and resting, each takes on a new form when the river of time runs in the opposite direction. These daily rituals, which we often perform without thought, would carry entirely different meanings, and in that difference, a new sense of wonder might arise. Imagine waking in the morning. In forward time, waking is the start of the day, the point from which everything unfolds. But in reverse, waking would be the final act of the day. You would open your eyes already filled with the knowledge of what you were about to undo. You would not rise with the eagerness of anticipation, but with the calm of certainty. Each step you take would not be into the unknown, but into the familiar, carefully retraced. And when night falls, sleep would not be the closing of one chapter to begin another, but the opening of a door into the day before. Each night would not push you forward, but pull you back. Sleep would be not rest for the coming day, but restoration of the one that already passed. Meals, too, would reverse their meaning. You would not sit at a table to satisfy hunger, but to create it. Each bite would not reduce your food, but assemble it piece by piece, until the plate before you was full. Again, hunger would grow sharper as the meal continued, not softer, and you would leave the table hungrier than when you sat down. At first, this feels strange, even absurd, but imagine how it might change the way we see food. Instead of devouring, you would be giving back. Instead of consuming, you would be restoring. Eating would be an act of generosity toward the past, returning what was taken. And perhaps that would soften the way we relate to the world around us, making us caretakers. Instead of consumers, healers instead of takers. Conversations would take on a dreamlike quality. Words would flow not from your mouth to another's ear, but from their ear back to your lips. Laughter would fold back into silence. Tears would retreat into eyes. Arguments would unravel into misunderstandings never spoken. Dialogue would become a choreography of retreat, each phrase a step toward quiet. What would intimacy feel like in such a world? Perhaps it would feel like an unfolding recognition, the joy of watching closeness retreat into curiosity, until two people part as strangers who have not yet met. That ending, which is truly a beginning, might feel strangely pure. Even the smallest gestures of the body would be transformed. A handshake would not be the start of trust, but its undoing, hands parting and then hovering just before contact. A hug would release itself before it ever tightened. A kiss would fade before lips touched, leaving behind only the anticipation. Would that anticipation feel frustrating, or would it feel sacred, like preserving a moment before it is ever reached? Perhaps in this reverse time, intimacy itself would be less about culmination and more about the space before, the potential that lingers endlessly. Nature, too, would follow this backward rhythm. The cycle of a single day would play out differently. Sunrise would not announce the arrival of light, but the retreat of darkness, shadows folding into themselves until they vanish. Sunset would not be the approach of night, but the retreat of day, colors dissolving into softness until the sky is once again untouched. Rain would climb from the earth to the sky, each drop pulling itself upward until clouds are heavy with gathered water. Snow would rise delicately from the ground, flurries gathering themselves into the air until the sky glows white with stored winter. The changing of seasons would no longer be a march forward, but a gentle unwinding. Autumn leaves lifting back onto branches, summer heat dissolving into spring, winter frost pulling itself quietly into hidden streams. Underground, imagine the ocean. Waves would not crash and scatter foam onto the shore, but retreat inward, gathering their energy, folding themselves back into calm. Tides would not surge forward, but slide backward, each wave smoothing the sand instead of disturbing it. The sound of the sea, instead of a roar, would become a hush. Standing on the shore, you would watch water slip away, not in loss, but in restoration. The horizon would not pull outward into distance, but draw inward toward intimacy. The sea itself would become less a force of destruction and more a cradle, pulling the world back into itself. And what about time within our own bodies? Heartbeats would not push blood forward, but draw it in, restoring rather than exhausting. Breath would not empty the lungs, but fill them again and again. Growth would not mean becoming larger, but becoming smaller, more delicate, more simple. Illness would not spread, but retreat. Wounds would not open, but close. Scars would fade until they vanish. To live in such a body would be to live in a constant state of healing, a perpetual unwinding into health. Pain would never accumulate. It would dissolve as soon as it appears. And perhaps this would change our understanding of what it means to live. Life would not be a struggle against decay, but a slow dance into renewal. It is easy to imagine this. Backward time as a paradise, free of loss, free of pain, free of the uncertainty that often troubles our days. But would it truly feel like paradise? Without struggle, without surprise, without the unknown, would joy lose some of its brilliance? Part of what makes happiness so intense is its fragility, the knowledge that it can vanish at any moment. If we knew that nothing was ever lost forever, would we still cherish it? Or would we take it for granted, knowing it will always return? In this way, a backward-flowing world might teach us something about our own, perhaps the fragility of forward. Time, the very thing that pains us, is also the thing that gives our moments their depth. Still, as you rest here tonight, imagining this reversed world, notice how calm it feels to picture it. The release of worry, the assurance that endings are not final, the sense that everything broken is gently mended, all of it wraps around you like a soft blanket. You can let yourself drift into that current, letting your mind rewind through the day, through the week, through the years. Each memory folding back into itself, each moment carried gently toward beginnings. The river of time may only flow forward in reality, but in your thoughts, it can flow however you wish. And in those thoughts, in this gentle imagining, you may find the peace you need to slip into sleep, As the vision of a backward-flowing world becomes clearer, you can begin to sense how deeply it would touch the meaning of time itself. Time is not only a measure of change, but also a stage on which meaning is built. In our world, we attach meaning to progress, to growth, to the idea of becoming. But in reverse, meaning would be tied to returning, to unbecoming, to rediscovering. And perhaps that shift would reveal something profound about the way we live, even now. Think about the way we mark progress. A child takes their first steps, and parents cheer because it is the beginning of independence. A student completes a degree, and the diploma marks the culmination of years of effort. A worker retires, and the moment is celebrated as the reward for decades of labor. All of these milestones point forward. They tell us, look how far you've come. But in reverse, the milestones would point backward. A retiree would not be honored for finishing a career, but for stepping into it. A student would not be praised for graduating, but for beginning their studies. A child would not be cheered for walking away, but for being lifted gently back into arms. The entire rhythm of accomplishment would shift from forward achievement to backward restoration. How would we feel in such a world? Would pride still exist, or would it be replaced by something gentler, like gratitude? Instead of saying, I built this, we might say, I returned to this. Instead of admiring the difficulty of climbing, we might admire the ease of descending. There would be less striving, less grasping, and more acceptance. The weight of competition, of ambition, might dissolve, leaving behind only the soft recognition that life is not about racing ahead, but about gracefully stepping back. Imagine history classes in a backward world. Instead of learning about wars beginning and expanding, you would study wars retreating into peace. Instead of hearing about nations rising to power, you would hear of nations giving power back, becoming smaller, quieter, until they return to their origins. The story of humanity would not be one of progress and struggle, but one of reconciliation, restoration, and healing. Children in classrooms would not be taught to look ahead at what humanity might achieve, but to look back at how humanity gently gave things away, step by step. The narrative would be one of release rather than conquest, and perhaps that would change the very nature of our collective identity. We would no longer see ourselves as pioneers forging into the unknown, but as caretakers guiding one another home. The sciences would also take on a new tone. In our world, science is a quest to discover what we do not know, to uncover mysteries that lie ahead. But in reverse, science would be a way of remembering. It would not be invention, but uninvention, not exploration, but rediscovery. A scientist in a backward world would not be a trailblazer, but a gentle archivist, watching knowledge slowly retreat into simplicity. Equations would not complicate, but simplify. Discoveries would not burst open, but quietly fold shut. The essence of science would not be expansion, but reduction. Not conquest, but calm, recognition. Art, too, would feel different. A painting in forward time is an act of creation, of bringing something new into the world. But in reverse, painting would be an act of restoration. A canvas covered in color would gradually lose its strokes. Pigments retreating into brushes, brushes into tubes of paint, until the canvas is once again blank. But in this blankness, there is beauty. The act of art would not be to add, but to subtract, not to impose, but to release. And perhaps, in that way, art would carry a new kind of purity, one that feels less like expression and more like quiet surrender. Even music would transform. Songs would not build to a crescendo, but soften into a hush. Melodies would not end in silence, but begin there, dissolving into notes that slowly fold back into the instrument, into the musician's breath, into stillness. Listening to music backward may sound strange to our ears, but perhaps in a reversed world it would feel natural, soothing, like watching a river retreat into its source. The climax of a song would not be the loudest moment, but the softest, the point where it vanishes into calm. And perhaps in this way, music would feel less like excitement and more like meditation. In such a world, even stories would change. Books would not be written from beginning to end, but read from end to beginning. The first page would be the conclusion, and with each turn, the story would undo itself until only blank pages remain. Instead of suspense, there would be serenity. Instead of surprise, there would be inevitability. The joy of reading would not be about wondering what happens next, but about savoring how everything Storytelling itself would be less about invention and more about unspooling, less about tension and more about release. What about memory? In forward time, memory is always behind us. We remember where we came from, what we have done, who we have met, but in reverse, memory would always be ahead, showing us what is coming, not what has been. To remember tomorrow is to live without uncertainty. It is to step into each day with the calm of recognition, as if every event is a reunion. That could feel like comfort, but it could also feel like a loss. Surprise is one of the sparks of life, the thing that makes laughter sudden and love exhilarating. Without surprise, would life lose some of its light? Or would it simply shine in a different way, glowing with familiarity instead of burning with novelty? And perhaps that is the heart of this backward world. It is not brighter or darker, not better or worse, but different. Its beauty lies in its reversal, in its offering of calm instead of thrill, of restoration instead of progress. To live in such a world would be to live without fear of loss, because every loss is undone. It would be to live without the anxiety of the unknown, because everything is known. It would be to rest each night not with worry but with assurance, not with anticipation but with recognition. As you let yourself drift with this thought, notice how it softens the edges of your mind. You do not need to solve the paradox. You do not need to decide whether such a world could exist. You only need to let it wash over you, like a gentle tide pulling you back into calmer waters. Feel how the idea itself cradles you, how it lifts the weight of tomorrow and replaces it with the comfort of yesterday. Let that comfort sink into your body, into your breath, into the rhythm of your heartbeat. Time may only flow forward in reality, but tonight, in your imagination, it flows backward, and in that flow, you are safe, you are calm, you are at rest. The longer you stay with this thought of time flowing backward, the more layers it reveals. At first it feels like a trick of imagination, a strange but harmless idea, like watching a film in reverse. But the deeper you let it settle, the more you realize how profoundly it would reshape the way we see the world and ourselves. Time is the stage on which everything unfolds. If that stage tilts in the other direction, every detail of life, from the grand to the ordinary, takes on a different hue. And the more you picture it, the more it begins to feel not strange at all, but strangely familiar, like something your heart has always known in whispers. Think about the way we measure progress. In our own world, progress is forward, motion, growth, expansion, achievement. We plant seeds and wait for them to grow into trees. We invest in children so they can grow into adults. We build cities higher and higher, technologies faster and faster. Progress is the story we tell ourselves to give meaning to the forward march of time. But in a reversed world, progress would not be growth but retreat. A tree would not rise from the soil but slowly shrink back into a seed. A skyscraper would not climb into the sky but dissolve floor by floor into the ground. Children would not grow into adults but dissolve into infancy. At first this feels like loss, but then you notice there is beauty in return. A tree folded back into a seed is not a tragedy but a restoration. A building gently is not destruction but release. What we call progress is only one kind of story. In reverse, progress becomes something else, not reaching forward but coming home. Imagine a farmer in this world. In forward time, a farmer plants, tends, harvests. In reverse, the harvest would scatter itself back into the field. Grains leaping into stalks, fruits folding back into blossoms. A meal eaten in the home would climb back into the kitchen, then back into raw ingredients, until it becomes part of the field again. Farming would not be labor to create, but labor to return. The farmer would not be striving to pull food from the earth, but gently guiding food back to its roots. The act would be the same, the rhythm similar, but the meaning would change. It would not be creation, but restoration, not taking, but giving back. This backward rhythm extends into the human heart as well. Consider forgiveness. In our world, forgiveness is an act of moving forward, of deciding to let go of something that has already happened. But in reverse, forgiveness would happen naturally, because harm itself would be undone. A cruel word would return to silence. A betrayal would return to trust. A wound would close as though it had never been opened. Forgiveness would no longer be an act of will, but the natural course of time. Would that make us gentler, or would it make us careless, knowing that nothing can truly harm forever? Perhaps both. Perhaps love in a reversed world would not be about patience or endurance, but about watching everything return to wholeness whether we choose it or not. Memory becomes even more peculiar here. Imagine closing your eyes and remembering the argument you will have tomorrow. You feel the sting of the words, the ache of the silence. But when tomorrow comes, you feel it unwind instead. The silence unbreaks into conversation, the sting unravels into laughter. The memory is not of pain, but of its undoing. You would live in constant assurance that everything painful is already healing, that everything broken is already mending. Memory would be a window not into loss, but into recovery. It would not weigh you down, but lift you up. In such a world, perhaps we would learn to trust more deeply, to let go more easily, because time itself guarantees restoration. Even death, the great wall at the end of forward time, would lose its sharpness. In our world, death feels final, the closing of the book, but in reverse, death would be only the first step of the return. The body would grow stronger, the breath fuller, the spirit brighter. Instead of decay, there would be renewal. Instead of grief, there would be reunion. Loved ones would not be gone forever, but slowly return, each day drawing closer until they stand beside us again. Imagine the comfort of this. Imagine lying down at night, not fearing that someone might slip away, but knowing with certainty that every separation is temporary, every farewell already contains its own greeting. Death would not be the end, but the soft beginning of return. It is curious to ask, in this backward world, what would become of purpose? In our own lives, we push forward toward goals. We study to build a career. We work to leave a legacy. We love to create a family. Everything points forward, like an arrow aimed at a target. But in reverse, there would be no targets, no futures to aim at. Purpose would not come from striving, but from surrender, not from building, but from letting go. Perhaps that would make life quieter, calmer, less frantic. Instead of ambition, we might feel gratitude. Instead of urgency, we might feel acceptance. And maybe that is not so different from what we long for even now. Maybe part of us is already tired of striving, already weary of endless reaching. Maybe part of us longs for the peace of return. And as you lie here, letting these thoughts settle into your mind, you may notice how soothing they are. The idea of backward time is not just a puzzle for the mind, it is a balm for the heart. It tells you that nothing is truly gone, that everything waits for you in some form. It tells you that endings are not final, that loss is not forever, that the river always carries you home. And whether or not such a world exists, imagining it can bring you peace. It can remind you that even in forward time, healing is possible. Even in forward time, cycles return. Even in forward time, nothing is truly lost, only transformed. So, let yourself rest in this vision. Close your eyes and feel yourself carried backward, gently, step by step, moment by moment. Each breath pulls you not forward into uncertainty, but back into familiarity. Each heartbeat returns you not to endings, but to beginnings. The current is strong enough to hold you, soft enough to soothe you. And in that current, you can let go of worry, let go of fear, let go of striving. You are already on your way home. When you imagine time flowing backward long enough, it begins to feel less like a strange trick of the mind and more like a second language, a rhythm your heart already knows how to follow. We are so used to time pressing forward, so accustomed to its insistence on progress and change, that we forget to question whether this is the only way it could be. But in dreams, in imagination, in the quiet hours of night, you can step into that other rhythm. You can let yourself feel what it might be like to live in a world that doesn't push but pulls, that doesn't scatter but gathers, that doesn't end but restores. Picture the way a single day would unfold in this reversed world. You begin by lying down in bed, not to rest from the day but to rise into it. As the hours move backward, the sun does not climb into the sky but sinks gently from afternoon into morning. Shadows stretch and then retreat, light softens into dawn. Instead of waking to begin, you wake to end, knowing each moment is already laid out before you, waiting to be unwrapped in reverse. Meals return to plates, words retreat into silence, steps retrace themselves along familiar paths. By the time you lay your head back down, you are not exhausted but restored, not weary, but refreshed, because every motion of the day has been a healing, a giving back. Now imagine this not just for a day, but for a lifetime. A lifetime in reverse is not a march into decline, but a walk into renewal. Wrinkles smooth, bodies strengthen, voices grow clear. Families do not break apart, but converge. Friends do not drift away, but grow closer. Even the passage of generations would change. Children would not be born as fragile beings and grow into strength. Instead, they would begin in old age, moving gently into vitality, until one day they are cradled as infants, returned into silence. Parents would watch their children not grow independent, but merge once more into dependence, into simplicity, into beginnings. The cycle would not be one of leaving, but of returning. Think about what that means for love. In forward time, we cling tightly because we know time threatens to carry everything away. We fear the ticking clock, the inevitable separations, the fragility of every embrace. But in reverse, the clock becomes a promise. Every parting is only the start of approach. Every farewell already contains its reunion. You would watch your loved ones draw nearer, not drift away. Old friends would return, parents would become children again in your arms, lovers would step closer with each passing day. Even grief would soften into hope, because you would know that nothing is truly lost. Everything you long for is waiting for you, just ahead on the path of return. What would memory feel like in such a life? In our world, memory holds what is gone. We cherish photos, journals, stories, because they preserve fragments of what can never come again. But in reverse, memory would be of what is still to come, what is on its way back to you. You would remember the meal that tomorrow will place on your table, the laugh that tomorrow will return to your ears, the hug that tomorrow will bring back to your arms. Memory would not be nostalgia, but anticipation. The past would not be behind. It would be in front, guiding your steps, ensuring that nothing ever arrives as a stranger. And with that certainty, perhaps worry would disappear. Anxiety is born of not knowing, but in reverse time, everything is known. Tomorrow is already yours. This certainty would change how we see purpose. In forward time, purpose is about striving, about climbing mountains that loom ahead. We set goals, we chase dreams, we labor for what has not yet happened. In reverse, goals would dissolve before us. Achievements would unravel into effort. Effort would unravel into intention, and intention would dissolve into desire. The point would not be to reach, but to release, not to build, but to let go. Purpose would not be about ambition, but about appreciation. Each day would not be a ladder to climb, but a gift to unwrap, already familiar, already beloved. Life would not feel like a contest, but like a gentle remembering. Consider how art would feel in this backward world. A painting would not emerge stroke by stroke, but lose them, colors retreating into blankness. A symphony would not build from silence to climax, but fade gently into quiet. A novel would not weave suspense, but undo it, each word vanishing into the page before until only silence remains. At first, this may seem sad, as if art itself is being undone. But think of the tenderness in that. Think of the way each note, each word, each brushstroke is released back into the universe, like a bird set free. Art would not be about possession, but about surrender. And perhaps in that surrender lies a beauty as deep as any creation. Even faith, in this reversed time, would shift its meaning. In our world, faith is about trust in what lies ahead, in what we cannot see. But in reverse, faith would not be about the unseen future, but about the inevitable past. It would not be trust in the unknown, but recognition of the known returning. Faith would not need hope, because there would be no uncertainty. Instead, faith would become gratitude, a quiet thankfulness for what is already assured. And gratitude, after all, is a kind of rest. It is the release of striving, the surrender of worry, the embrace of what already is. As you let these ideas sink into you, notice how calm they feel. There is no rush here, no demand, no pressure. The world is not asking you to climb, but to descend, not to achieve, but to return. Each moment is not a fleeting spark that will be lost, but a gentle glow that will arrive again. This vision of backward time is not a puzzle you must solve. It is a song you can rest inside, a lullaby that carries you. You can let your body soften into it, let your breath slow, let your mind float. For in this world there is no end to fear, only beginnings to welcome. And perhaps that is the secret hidden in this thought experiment. Perhaps the reason imagining backward time feels so soothing is because it reminds us of something we often forget, that even in forward time, nothing is truly lost. The world is full of cycles. Seasons return, tides return, sleep returns, love returns in new forms. We already live in rhythms of renewal. To imagine backward time is simply to magnify those rhythms, to lean into them, to let them cradle us. And as you drift tonight, letting yourself be carried by this current of imagination, you may find that you are already at peace. You may find that the river of time, whether forward or backward, is always guiding you toward rest. The more you let yourself dwell in this imagined world where time flows backward, the more you begin to feel its quiet pull. It is as if some part of you already knows what it would be like, as though the idea itself is not foreign but hidden, waiting for you to notice it. Our daily lives are shaped so deeply by the forward push of time that to imagine the reverse is to see everything familiar in a new light. And in that new light, the world softens. It slows. It becomes a place where nothing is truly lost and everything is gently returned. Picture a single relationship in this reversed time. In forward life, we meet people, we form bonds, we grow closer, and then, inevitably, with distance or death, we part. These arcs of connection often carry both joy and pain, the happiness of intimacy and the sadness of goodbye. But if the river runs the other way, the shape of love is transformed. Every parting becomes a reunion. Every tear is rewound into laughter. You would not fear the day when someone drifts away, because you know that each day brings them closer again. Imagine seeing someone you lost years ago, lowly, gently, step by step, they return into your life, not as a ghost or memory, but as themselves, moving nearer until you hold them once more. The thought alone feels like comfort, like warmth, seeping into the heart. Even the idea of regret would be different. In forward time, regret is heavy because what is done cannot be undone. Words spoken cannot be retracted. Actions taken cannot be reversed. But in backward time, every regret carries its own undoing. The unkind word would fold back into silence. The rash action would retreat into stillness. Mistakes would dissolve, not into scars, but into fresh beginnings. Would we even feel regret, knowing every wound will heal itself? Or would regret shift into something softer, more like gentle anticipation of the moment when wrongs are undone? Perhaps forgiveness itself would become unnecessary, because time forgives on our behalf. Now, let your mind wander to the larger story of humanity. In forward time, history is full of progress and tragedy, creation and destruction. But in reverse, those tragedies would transform. Wars would retreat into peace. Cities shattered by disaster would rebuild themselves, stone by stone, until they stand tall again. Famine would fade into abundance, diseases into health, chaos into order. Even the darkest chapters of human cruelty would unwind, hatred dissolving, back into ignorance, violence unraveling into quiet. The story of humanity in reverse would not be one of struggle toward improvement, but of gentle return to harmony. It would be a story of healing. Imagine how different it would feel to study history if every sorrow ended not in ruin, but in restoration. Children would read not of wars breaking peace, but of peace reclaiming wars, not of nations falling apart, but of nations uniting back into simplicity. The earth itself would join this rhythm. Forests cut down in forward time would grow back, trees lifting from stumps into towering canopies. Rivers polluted by human hands would cleanse themselves, toxins folding back into the ground, waters flowing clear again. Animals driven to extinction would reappear, their populations slowly increasing as time retreated. Coral reefs would rebuild, glaciers would regrow, deserts would shrink into fertile fields. Our forward world often carries a weight of guilt, the knowledge of damage we have done, but in reverse, that guilt would be eased, because the earth itself would undo our harm. We would not need to save it, it would save itself. Every action of destruction would be a prelude to renewal, and in this way, even the planet would feel like a place of rest. Think about the stars above you. In forward time, stars burn out. They expand, explode, collapse. The universe itself expands, scattering galaxies farther and farther apart. But in reverse, the stars would gather their light. Supernovas would collapse back into glowing orbs. Galaxies would draw closer, constellations tightening, the night sky growing fuller. The vast cold distance of space would shrink into intimacy. The cosmos itself would become a homecoming, everything returning to its source. It would not be frightening, but soothing, like the universe breathing inward, preparing for silence. What, then, would become of us as individuals? In forward time, identity is built. We add experiences, we add knowledge, we add responsibilities. We carry the weight of accumulation. But in reverse, identity would be unbuilt. We would shed layers instead of adding them. Complexity would simplify. Responsibilities would dissolve. Knowledge would slip away, leaving behind curiosity and wonder. We would end not as hardened adults, but as open children, eyes wide to the mystery of existence. Would that feel like loss? Perhaps, but it might also feel like freedom. To be free of burdens, free of guilt, free of ambition, until nothing is left but presence. The end of life would not be a collapse into emptiness, but a return to innocence. Even the passage of time itself might feel different. In forward life, time can feel like a race. We rush to meet deadlines, to achieve goals, to catch up before opportunities pass us by. We live with the anxiety that time is scarce, that it is slipping away. But in reverse, time would feel abundant. There would be no rushing, because everything you long for is returning to you. No opportunity is lost. It is only waiting ahead. No moment is gone. It is only on its way back. The scarcity of time would vanish, replaced by assurance. Time would not be something you spend, but something you receive as you lie here. Letting these images drift through your thoughts, you may notice how your body relaxes into them. There is no pressure here, no need to grasp or hold on. The backward flow carries you gently, like a river that asks nothing of you but to float. Every fear you hold can dissolve into the assurance that nothing is gone. Every worry about the future can soften into the certainty that the future is simply the past waiting to return. And every ache of the heart can be soothed by the vision of reunion, of restoration, of return. So let yourself rest inside this thought. Imagine your own day unwinding, step by step. Imagine your life gently folding back toward youth, toward innocence, toward beginnings. Imagine the world around you healing itself, restoring itself, returning to wholeness. And as you breathe slowly, As your eyelids grow heavy, feel that backward current carrying you. It is not rushing, it is not harsh. It is soft, steady, gentle, and it carries you not into fear, but into peace. As you settle more deeply into this vision of backward flowing time, it begins to feel less like fantasy and more like a mirror, showing us things we often overlook in our ordinary lives. It is as though imagining the world in reverse highlights what we already sense. That much of existence is about cycles, about returning, about patterns repeating. Even now, with time moving forward, we see it in seasons, in tides, in the rising and setting of the sun. Backward time simply exaggerates what is already there, showing us how much comfort can be found in repetition, in return, in the assurance that nothing truly vanishes, but instead transforms. Imagine seasons unwinding themselves. In forward time, autumn leaves fall, winter freezes, spring blossoms, summer blazes. But in reverse, those same cycles would feel different. Leaves would rise from the ground to reattach themselves, glowing with color before turning green. Snow would climb from earth to sky, filling clouds that lighten into clear air. Flowers would retreat into buds, their petals folding with grace. The world would not be decaying but restoring, not moving into endings but into beginnings. Each season would not pass away but return home, and perhaps in that return there would be a softness we often miss. Think of the ocean tides. Normally, we watch waves crash against the shore, break apart into foam, and retreat. But in backward time, the retreat would come first. The foam gathering, the wave unbreaking, until the water flows smoothly back into the sea. Instead of chaos, there would be calm. Instead of erosion, there would be restoration. Coastlines would rebuild themselves, sands gathering instead of scattering. The ocean would not be a force of destruction, but of healing, each tide a gesture of repair. The sea would cradle the earth, not wear it down. Don't think of the sky itself. Lightning, in forward time, is sudden and violent, a flash that splits the night, but in reverse, lightning would not strike. Instead, light would gather itself back into clouds, thunder folding into silence. Storms would not explode outward, but implode inward, clouds dissolving into air until the sky is calm once. Again, rain would rise into clouds, storms would unform, and weather would not feel threatening but gentle. Nature itself would be a rhythm of mending, every disturbance folding back into harmony. Even the act of aging would take on this healing quality. Wrinkles would not deepen but smooth. Joints would not stiffen but loosen. Energy would not fade but return. Every year would bring you closer to vitality, not farther from it. Imagine walking through a park and watching older people grow younger with each passing season. Their steps lighter, their voices stronger, until they return to the joy of childhood. Imagine yourself experiencing this same renewal day by day, your body healing into youth. The fear of age would dissolve, the sadness of decline would vanish. Life would not feel like running out of time, but like being replenished by it. And what about the mind? In forward time, knowledge accumulates. We learn, we study, we gather facts, we piece together wisdom, but in reverse, that wisdom would slowly dissolve. At first, this seems like a loss. To forget what we know feels frightening. But consider the other side. As wisdom unwinds, so too does worry. The burdens of knowledge would lift. The complexity of thought would fade into simplicity. To see the world again not as a tangled web, but as a fresh wonder, that too is a gift. The mind would not be burdened by what it has learned, but freed to experience the world anew, like a child seeing stars for the first time. Perhaps in reverse time, every day would feel like discovery. Memory, too, would become softer. In our world, memory clings to the past, often with longing or regret. But in backward time, memory looks forward. You would remember joys not as things lost, but as things approaching. You would not ache for the past, you would await it. Every laugh, every embrace, every moment of happiness would be certain to return. And when it does, it would feel both familiar and new, like meeting an old friend again. Nostalgia would vanish, because there would be no need for longing. Everything cherished would be waiting for you, just ahead. Even society itself would change under this rhythm. Economies that strive for growth would instead shrink toward simplicity. Instead of consuming more, humanity would consume less, returning resources to the earth. Cities would not sprawl outward but contract inward, releasing land back into forests and fields. Technology would not accelerate but decelerate, inventions dissolving into ideas, ideas dissolving into dreams. At first, this might feel like loss, but think of the peace in it. A world less driven by ambition, less frantic in its pace, less restless in its striving. A world that values not the next big thing, but the return to stillness, to balance, to simplicity. Art and creativity would still exist, but their nature would shift. Instead of pushing boundaries, artists would gently release them. Instead of creating something new, they would uncreate, peeling back layers until blankness remains. But perhaps blankness itself would be art, a canvas, free of clutter, a silence, free of noise. The act of unmaking can be as beautiful as making, because it reminds us that not everything needs to be added. Sometimes beauty lies in what is taken away. Sometimes the loveliest thing is the return to nothing, the quiet embrace of emptiness. And what of spirituality in such a world? In forward time, spirituality often asks us to trust in what comes next, in what lies beyond death, in the mystery of what we cannot yet see. But in reverse, spirituality would not be about the unknown, but about the known. It would not be about faith in what has not yet happened, but gratitude for what is certain to return. Prayer would not be a request for the future, but a thankfulness for the past that waits just ahead. The sacred would not be a destination, but a homecoming. The divine would not be something we reach for, but something we return to, step by step, with every breath, as you lie here. Letting these images play gently in your mind, notice how peaceful they feel. There is no struggle in this world of reversed time, no anxiety about what is to come. Everything comes back. Everyone comes back. Nothing is truly lost. The very fabric of existence is woven not of scarcity, but of abundance, not of endings, but of beginnings. And as you feel your body soften, your breath deepen, you may realize that this vision, though imagined, carries a truth. Even in forward time, we are surrounded by returns of seasons, of cycles, of rhythms. To think backward is only to magnify what is already present, to hear more clearly the lullaby that time is already singing. So let yourself drift with it. Let yourself imagine the seasons rising instead of falling, the oceans restoring instead of eroding, your own body renewing instead of declining. Let the current of backward time carry you gently, steadily, into the calm that lies ahead. You are safe here. You are whole. You are at rest. The longer you let yourself imagine this reversed world, the more it begins to reveal not only what would change, but also what would remain the same. For even if time itself ran in the opposite direction, certain truths of existence might endure. Connection, meaning, beauty, these may not depend on the flow of time at all, but on the way we perceive them. And as you drift further into this thought, you might begin to feel that time, forward or backward, is only a vessel. And what fills it is the essence of life itself. Think about the act of conversation. In forward time, we speak to be heard. We wait to listen. We exchange words that pass into memory. In reverse, the same conversation would unfold backward, with words retreating into silence, thoughts dissolving into the mind before they are spoken. And yet, the essence of communication would remain, the sense of connection, the recognition of another person's presence. Whether words flow outward or inward, whether laughter unspools or gathers, the bond created is still real. The mechanics change, but the heart of it, the feeling of being known, endures. The same is true of love. In forward time, love is a process of becoming, of strangers turning into companions, of companions turning into soulmates, of lives intertwining. In reverse, love is a process of unbecoming, of soulmates partying into companions, companions into acquaintances, acquaintances into strangers. And yet, in both directions, love is love. The tenderness, the longing, the joy of presence, the ache of separation, these feelings exist whether the bond is forming or unraveling. Perhaps, then, love is not bound to time at all. It is not about direction, but about recognition. It is the same flame, whether it is being lit or extinguished. Imagine music, played forward. It begins quietly, rises into intensity, and resolves. In stillness, played backward, it begins in stillness, dissolves into intensity, and fades into quiet. The structure changes, but the effect, the emotional resonance. Music is not about the order of notes, but about the way those notes stir the heart. Even backward, music would still be music. Perhaps it would even reveal new harmonies, new textures, new forms of beauty hidden in the reversal. This thought can be extended to life itself. Forward, life feels like striving. Backward, life feels like returning. Forward, we learn. Backward, we unlearn. Forward, we gain complexity. Backward, we gain simplicity. But in both flows, what remains constant is experience. The wonder of existing, the act of noticing, the ability to feel. Whether we are becoming or unbecoming, whether we are learning or forgetting, the fact of living is unchanged. Time is the current, but life is the water itself. Now picture the way backward time would shape our sense of responsibility. In forward life, we act, knowing our choices shape what comes after. But in reverse, what comes after is already decided. We cannot change outcomes, only watch them unfold. At first, this feels like freedom, or perhaps futility. But think again. Even in our forward world, much of life is outside our control. The weather, the passage of seasons, the inevitability of death, these are not in our hands. What is in our hands is the way we meet them, the way we live within them. In that sense, forward or backward, responsibility is the same. Not to change the river, but to choose how to float upon it. Consider, too, the way backward time might shift our sense of justice. In our world, wrongs are punished, wounds are healed. Slowly, scars remain. In reverse, wrongs undo themselves, wounds close instantly, scars vanish. Would justice still be needed if every harm was erased by time itself? Or would justice transform into something else? Not retribution, but reflection. Not punishment, but awareness. Perhaps in such a world, morality would not be about fixing what is broken, but about cherishing the moments before they break. We might learn to value fragility not as a flaw, but as a form of beauty. Let your thoughts wander to art once again. In Forward Time, we create art to capture what might otherwise be lost. We paint sunsets because they fade. We write poems because moments pass. But in Backward Time, nothing is ever truly lost. Sunsets rise again, moments return. Would we still create art? Perhaps yes, but for different reasons. Art would not be about preservation, but about release, about celebrating the act of letting go. A painting might fade stroke by stroke, and in that fading lies its meaning. A poem might dissolve line by line, and in that dissolution lies its beauty. Art in reverse would not be about holding, but about surrendering. And in surrender, there is a kind of grace. Imagine standing at the edge of the ocean, watching waves withdraw instead of advance. At first it seems strange, but then you notice the stillness it creates. Each retreating wave reveals the shore more clearly. Each withdrawal uncovers what is hidden. Perhaps Backward Time would do the same for us. Instead of covering life in layers of complexity, it would peel them back, showing us the essence beneath. Simplicity, clarity, presence. Life would not be about accumulation, but about revelation. And perhaps, in that revelation, we would find truths that Forward Time often obscures. Even sleep, in this reversed world, would take on new meaning. In Forward Life, sleep restores us for what lies ahead. In Backward Life, sleep returns us to what has already been. Each night would be a reunion, not with dreams of the future, but with memories of the past approaching. We would close our eyes not to prepare, but to remember. And when we wake, it would not be to newness, but to familiarity. The cycle of sleep itself would remind us that time is not only about moving forward, it is about renewal, about cycles, about returns. Even now, in our forward world, sleep carries us backward each night, undoing the strain of the day, restoring us to calm. Perhaps that is why this thought of reverse time feels so soothing, because in a way we already live it. As you breathe slowly now, imagine your own day unwinding, the meals returning to their plates, the conversations folding back into silence, the steps retracing themselves on the ground. Imagine your body growing lighter, your thoughts softening, your heart releasing its burdens. You are not racing toward tomorrow, you are returning to yesterday, and in that return you are safe, you are whole, you are at peace. Let yourself rest in this thought. Time may only run forward in the world outside, but here, in the quiet of your mind, it can flow however you choose. Tonight, let it flow backward. Let it carry you into restoration, into reunion, into calm. Drift with it, gently, until sleep itself embraces you. The more you drift into this reversed vision, the more you begin to notice that what seemed at first like a trick of imagination begins to carry lessons of its own. When time runs forward, we live under the weight of urgency. We chase deadlines, cling to opportunities, and fear that if we do not act quickly enough, something will be lost forever. But in backward time, that urgency dissolves. Nothing can truly be lost, because everything returns. The very rhythm of life would teach us patience, not by demanding it, but by making impatience unnecessary. Imagine standing in a garden. In forward life, you plant seeds and wait for them to sprout, caring for them as they grow into blossoms. In reverse, the blossoms would already be there, their petals retreating into buds. buds retreating into seeds, seeds slipping back into the earth. At first, you might think this takes away the magic of growth, but notice what it gives instead. The reassurance that nothing is final. The flower that faded yesterday is not gonna knit, is only waiting to rise again tomorrow. The garden itself is eternal, not through constant growth, but through constant return. Now, think of families. In our world, parents raise children, then slowly release them into independence. There is joy in watching them grow, but also a quiet ache in knowing they will move on. In reverse, that ache would be softened. Children would not move farther away, but closer. Every day would bring them nearer, not as adults carrying burdens of their own, but as young souls returning to simplicity. Parents would not face the pain of letting go, but the joy of reunion, until at last children return to infancy, to the safety of arms. Families would not scatter across generations, but collapse back into one. The home would not empty, but fill. Even the concept of success would shift. In forward time, we strive to climb, to achieve, to build legacies. But in reverse, success would not be measured in what you accomplish, but in how gracefully you release. The worker would not be praised for earning more, but for returning what they had. The artist would not be honored for creating masterpieces, but for allowing them to fade back into blankness. The teacher would not be remembered for filling minds with knowledge, but for gently emptying them into openness. Success would not mean holding, but letting go. And perhaps, in that letting go, there is a deeper peace than in all the striving forward life demands. Picture a city in this backward world. Skyscrapers would not rise higher each year, but grow shorter, floor by floor, until they return to earth. Streets would not become busier, but emptier, cars retreating into factories. Factories dissolving into ores hidden deep in the ground. The city itself would not be a monument to expansion, but to simplicity. Its beauty would not lie in how much it builds, but in how gently it gives back. Imagine walking through such a city, less noise, less rush, less demand. A city unwinding into calm, releasing its weight back to the earth. Would it feel like decline, or would it feel like relief? Even relationships between nations would change. In forward history, nations often clash, competing for power and resources. But in reverse, power would shrink, borders would dissolve, weapons would disappear into raw metal, and conflict would fade into harmony. War itself would not begin but end. Soldiers would not march into battle but march home. Entire histories of violence would undo themselves, blood retreating into veins, wounds healing before they are inflicted. The memory of pain would remain, but only until it is undone, replaced by peace. And perhaps in this world, peace would feel less like a goal to be fought for, and more like the natural rhythm of existence. But even as you imagine all of this restoration, you may find yourself asking, without struggle, would life lose its richness? Forward time gives us triumphs, because it gives us trials. Backward time erases trials, softens every edge. Would we still savor joy if we knew it could not truly be threatened? Or would joy become something gentler, something quieter, like the calm of a familiar melody rather than the thrill of a new one? Perhaps the richness of backward life would not lie in intensity but in serenity. Not in surprise, but in assurance. It would not excite, but it would soothe. And maybe that is exactly what our tired hearts long for. Think of memory again. In forward life, memory can be bittersweet. We remember happiness and feel sorrow because it is gone. In reverse, that sorrow would vanish. Memory would always be a promise, not a reminder. To remember a smile would mean knowing you were about to see it again. To remember a voice would mean anticipating it just ahead. Nostalgia would not ache, it would comfort. The past would never feel distant, it would be always near, always waiting. And perhaps in such a world, our hearts would finally be free of the weight of longing. Let your thoughts stretch further still. Imagine the very end of the universe in this reversed time. In forward cosmology, the universe is expanding, galaxies rushing apart, stars burning out. But in reverse, galaxies would draw together, stars would brighten as they contract, matter itself would fold inward. The universe would not collapse in violence, but in grace, returning to unity. Imagine the night sky filling with more and more stars, brighter and closer, until everything gathers into a single radiant whole. And then, slowly, that light folding into silence. Not an ending, but a return. Not destruction, but homecoming. As you drift with these thoughts, notice how they calm you. The river of backward time is not harsh, not demanding. It does not ask. You two strive or compete. It asks only that you float. It promises not loss but return, not endings but beginnings. And even though this world is only imagined, its comfort is real. It reminds you that even in forward time, cycles bring things. Back seasons, tides, sleep, love in new forms. Nothing is truly gone. Everything transforms. Everything, in some way, returns. So let yourself rest here. Feel the weight of forward time lift off your shoulders. Feel the peace of backward time cradle you. Let your body soften, your breath slow, your thoughts quiet. You are not racing into the unknown. You are returning to what you already know. You are safe. You are whole. You are at peace. The more you sink into this vision of backward time, the more it begins to feel like a kind of dream you don't want to wake from. There is a gentleness in it, a soothing rhythm that seems to untangle all the knots we tie ourselves in during our forward-moving days. You can almost feel it in your body as you imagine it, like the loosening of a tight grip, like the soft exhale after holding your breath for too long. To live in a world where time flows backward is to live in a world where pressure dissolves, where urgency evaporates, where every ending is only the start of a return. Think about how childhood would feel in this reversed life. In forward time, childhood is fleeting, a brief chapter we spend the rest of our lives longing for. We carry nostalgia like a quiet ache, remembering the innocence, the wonder, the freedom. But in backward time, childhood is not behind us, it is ahead. Every day carries us closer to it. The worries of adulthood would fade, responsibilities would dissolve, and the simplicity of youth would slowly return. Imagine the comfort of knowing that the laughter of play, the curiosity of discovery, the safety of being cared for are not gone forever, but waiting to meet you again. Childhood would not be a memory but a destination, always drawing nearer. Education, too, would feel different. In forward time, children begin in ignorance and grow into knowledge. In reverse, knowledge would unravel into simplicity. At first, this sounds like loss. Why would we want to forget what we have learned? But think again. So much of our stress comes from the weight of knowledge, from the endless stream of facts, responsibilities, and complexities. To let that dissolve is not to diminish, but to lighten. Imagine finishing a long career and then slowly returning to classrooms, to learning for its own sake, to curiosity unburdened by expectation. Imagine knowledge retreating not into emptiness, but into openness. The mind would not be cluttered with answers, but free to wonder again. And wonder, after all, is where wisdom begins. Work and ambition would also take on new meaning. In our world, careers often demand decades of striving, of sacrifice, of chasing goals. In backward time, we would begin with rest, with retirement, with leisure. Each year would bring us closer not to greater responsibility, but to less. The burden of work would lift, little by little, until one day it is gone entirely. The story of a career would not be about what you build, but about what you release. Not about what you achieve, but about what you give back. And perhaps, in that act of release, there is a peace far deeper than in the act of striving. Consider love once again. In forward time, a romance begins with spark and passion, and over time it deepens, matures, sometimes fades. In reverse, the arc is different. Love would begin with companionship, with maturity, with shared history. And day by day, it would return to its spark, its first glance, its beginning. Imagine walking hand in hand with someone, not into old age, but out of it, watching your shared burdens grow lighter, your shared joys grow brighter, until the two of you part as strangers, each carrying the sweetness of recognition without the weight of loss. There is sadness in that, perhaps, but also purity. The purity of beginnings, the purity of love as it first stirs. Even friendships would feel gentler. In forward life, friends often drift apart, lives scattering in different directions. In reverse, the opposite would happen. Strangers would slowly become friends, distance would shrink, conversations would unfold backward into first introductions. Instead of loss, there would always be approach. You would not ache for old friends because you would know they are on their way back to you, step by step, closer each day. The circle of connection would never truly break. Think about travel. In forward time, we set out to explore, to discover new places, to see the unfamiliar. In backward time, every journey would be a return. A trip would not lead you to the unknown, but to the familiar you had left behind. At first, this may seem dull, but think of the comfort in it. Every journey ends at home. Every path leads back to origin. There would be no fear of being lost, because every road carries you toward what you already know. Travel itself would be less about conquest and more about reunion, less about expansion and more about coming home. Even language would feel different. In forward time, language evolves, new words are invented, meanings shift. In reverse, language would simplify. Words would vanish, dialects would converge, communication would retreat into its roots. At first, this sounds like silence, but silence itself can be eloquent. Silence is not emptiness, but openness, a space where meaning lingers without being pressed into form. In a backward flowing world, perhaps silence would become the highest form of expression, not a lack of words, but the presence of peace. Spirituality too would shift with this rhythm. In forward time, we often look ahead, beyond death, too. Imagine what comes next. In backward time, the mystery would not be about what lies beyond, but about what lies before. Death would not be a door into the unknown, but a door into the known. It would not lead us forward into speculation, but backward into beginnings. Spirituality would not be hope, but gratitude, not reaching for what might be, but honoring what already was. Faith would not be a leap, but a return. And the greatest comfort of all might be in the way backward time treats loss. In our world, loss is final. Death, separation, endings all carry a weight we cannot undo. But in reverse, loss is never permanent. Every separation contains its reunion. Every ending contains its beginning. You would know with certainty that what you long for is already on its way back to you. That knowledge alone is enough to quiet even the deepest grief. Imagine lying in bed, missing someone you loved. In forward time, that ache can feel endless, but in backward time, you would smile because you know they are coming back. You know the current of time is carrying them toward you, just as surely as it is carrying you toward them. As you rest in this thought tonight, let yourself feel that comfort. Let yourself imagine that backward current flowing through your own life. Imagine your responsibilities dissolving, your worries fading, your losses returning. Imagine the world around you unwinding its chaos into harmony, its noise into silence, its pain into healing. You do not need to rush. You do not need to strive. You are already being carried. You are already on your way back. And as your breath slows, as your eyelids grow heavy, you can let yourself drift fully into this rhythm. Each moment unwinds, each thought retreats, each burden dissolves. The river of backward time cradles you, rocking you gently toward beginnings, toward peace, toward rest. The more deeply you sink into this backward vision of time, the more you realize how much it changes your sense of rhythm, not only in the world around you, but inside yourself. We often think of time as something external, measured in clocks and calendars. But time is also an inner experience, the beat of your heart, the pace of your breath, the shifting of your thoughts. In forward time, those rhythms feel like steps on a path stretching ahead, pulling you forward whether you want to go or not. But in backward time, those rhythms would feel like gentle returns, like waves folding back toward the shore, like a song unwinding into silence. Imagine lying in bed. In this reversed world, your day would not be a story pushing you forward into exhaustion, but a story retreating into restoration. Every meal you had eaten would return to you. Every step you had taken would retrace itself. Every word you had spoken would fold back into quiet. By the time you closed your eyes, you would not feel drained but replenished. Sleep itself would not be preparation for the day ahead, but reunion with the day behind. Rest would not mean pausing the rush of life. Rest would mean allowing life itself to flow back into peace. Think about breathing. In forward life, we inhale to take in, exhale to let go. But in backward time, exhalations would return to your lungs, filling you again. Breathing would be less about striving and more about receiving, less about effort and more about restoration. Imagine every sigh not as release but as renewal. Imagine every gasp not as need but as abundance. In such a world, even the smallest act of life, the rhythm of air itself, would be a reminder that nothing is ever lost. What leaves you always returns. The same is true of the heartbeat. In forward time, your heart pushes blood outward, sustaining the body. In backward time, blood would return to the heart, gathering strength inward. Instead of expending, you would be replenishing. Instead of pouring out, you would be receiving. The very core of your body would feel like a vessel of return. And perhaps, in such a rhythm, we would learn to see ourselves not as creatures who burn through time, but as creatures who are continually restored by it. Now let your imagination wander outward, into the larger cycles of the planet. Consider the forests. In forward time, trees fall, decay, and return to the soil. In reverse, they would rise, their trunks pulling upward, their branches gathering leaves from the ground. The forest would never empty, never thin, but always grow denser, more alive. Fires would not spread destruction, but retreat into sparks, into stillness, into safety. The forest floor would not accumulate ash, but shed it, revealing fresh growth. The woods would be a place of endless return, not a reminder of fragility, but of resilience. The oceans, too, would reflect this rhythm. In forward time, coastlines erode, sands scatter, cliffs crumble. In reverse, cliffs would rebuild themselves, rocks climbing from the water to reform the land. Shores would expand, not shrink. The sea itself would feel less like a force of wearing away and more like a partner in creation, carrying the earth back into its fullness. Imagine walking along the beach in this world. Each step would not sink into sand that disappears beneath waves, but would press into sand that grows firmer, thicker, restored by the retreat of the sea. Even footprints would not mark the earth, but vanish as if they had never been dot. Picture the sky, clouds, in forward time, drift, form, and dissolve. In reverse, clouds would gather their vapor upward, swelling until the sky is heavy and full. Rain would not fall but rise, drop by drop, into these waiting clouds. The rhythm of weather would not be about scattering but about collecting. Storms would not explode outward but quietly unravel into calm. Even thunder would fold back into silence. In such a world, the sky itself would feel less like a source of change and more like a sanctuary, a place where every disturbance is undone, every shift returned to balance. What about the cosmos itself? In forward time, stars are born, they burn, and they die. In reverse, stars would not collapse into black holes, but expand into fullness, their energy gathered inward. Galaxies would not race apart, but drift closer until they merge in intimacy. The universe would not scatter into cold distance, but fold into warmth. Instead of fearing the eventual fading of all light, we would witness light intensify as time rewound. The night sky would not grow emptier, but richer, more brilliant with every passing moment. The heavens themselves would be a reminder of return, of gathering, of wholeness. And what of human memory in such a universe? In forward time, memory is fragile. We forget, we lose, we ache for what slips beyond recall. In backward time, memory would not fade. It would sharpen as moments approached, carrying their familiarity. Ahead of them, the older you grew, the clearer your memories of what was still to come. Forgetting would dissolve into remembering, not because the mind was growing stronger, but because time itself was aligning experience with memory. Imagine the comfort of waking each day already knowing the laughter you were about to hear, the faces you were about to see, the joys you were about to feel. The mind would never be empty, never uncertain, but always full of reunion. This raises questions about freedom. In forward time, freedom feels tied to the unknown, to the ability to choose, to shape what comes next. But in reverse, if everything is already set, if tomorrow is already yesterday, what does freedom mean? Perhaps freedom in such a world would not be about shaping outcomes, but about shaping perspective. The river may flow backward, but how you float, how you notice, how you experience that would still be yours. You could drift with resistance, or with surrender, with fear, or with peace. And maybe that is the truest kind of freedom, the kind that exists no matter how time moves. As you lie here, imagining these rhythms of return, notice how they soothe you. The thought of backward time is not meant to solve paradoxes or prove theories. It is meant to calm, to remind you that even in forward time, so much of life already flows in cycles of return. Seasons, tides, breath, sleep all are reminders that endings are not final, that return is part of the fabric of existence. You do not need to fight the river, you only need to float. And as you float, you are carried not into fear but into peace. So let yourself drift with it now. Feel your breath rise, not forward but backward. Feel your thoughts unwind, your body soften, your spirit rest. The day retreats into calm. The night carries you gently into restoration. Time itself folds around you, not as a push, but as an embrace. And in that embrace, you are safe, you are whole, you are at peace. As this backward flow of time stretches further in your imagination, it begins to take on the quality of a lullaby. Each detail, each image, folds gently into the next, like waves retreating into the sea, like breath returning to the lungs. It is not a story of urgency or suspense, but of release, of calm, of return. The more you follow it, the more it begins to shape the way you feel about your own place in the universe, as though you are not merely imagining a different timeline, but listening to a deeper rhythm that has always been there. Beneath the surface of your days, think of your own memories. The way they form in forward life, they arrive as moments pass quickly, and then leave behind their echoes. Sometimes those echoes are sweet, sometimes painful, but always tinged with the ache of something lost. In backward time, the ache disappears. Every memory is a promise, every cherished moment is not gone but approaching. The first time you laughed, until your stomach hurt, the first time you fell in love, the first time you felt truly at peace. Of those moments are waiting for you, just ahead. Imagine the comfort of that. Imagine lying in bed, not longing for what has passed, but smiling in anticipation of it returning. The past would never be a shadow, it would be a light guiding you home. Now picture the way human history would appear. Through this lens, in forward time, we tell stories of civilizations rising and falling, of empires expanding and collapsing, of progress followed by decline. But in reverse, decline would always become progress, collapse would become growth, loss would become renewal. Ancient ruins would not crumble further into dust, but rise into grandeur. Languages that disappeared would return, spoken again, familiar on the tongue. Traditions forgotten would revive, dances and songs returning to the rhythm of life. Even humanity's mistakes would be undone, pollution dissolving, wars unraveling, greed fading into generosity. It would be as though the whole of human history were one long act of restoration. Consider the simple acts of daily life, and how they would feel different in this reversed rhythm. Eating would not empty plates, but fill them. Drinking would not quench thirst, but create it. Walking would not take you farther from home, but bring you closer. Work would not tire you, but refresh you, each task undoing itself until you are free. Even conversations would feel different, arguments unwinding into agreement. Misunderstandings dissolving into clarity, silence settling gently at the end like a blanket. Every act would be a release, not a strain. The world would not be asking you to do more, but to give back, to let go, to rest. Think of nature again. In forward life, a flower blooms and withers. In reverse, it withers and then blooms, petals, gathering themselves into freshness. In forward life, rivers carve valleys, erosion slowly shaping mountains into dust. In reverse, valleys fill, mountains rise, dust gathers into stone. In forward life, animals are born, live, and die. In reverse, they grow younger, stronger, until they vanish not into death, but into birth. The entire natural world would become a story of resilience, of renewal, of endless beginning. To walk in such a world would be to walk not through fleeting beauty, but through eternal restoration. This rhythm would change the way we see suffering. In forward life, suffering often feels unbearable because it seems permanent. Pain leaves scars, loss leaves holes, grief lingers like a shadow. But in reverse, suffering is temporary by its very nature. Every wound heals, every scar fades, every loss is undone. Pain is not something to be feared, but something to be trusted, because you know it is already on its way out. Even grief becomes softer, because grief is simply the moment before joy's return. Imagine the relief of living with that certainty, not just hoping things will get better, but knowing they must. And yet, even as you feel the comfort of this reversed flow, you may begin to wonder, would it take away something precious? Forward life is filled with surprise. We never know what comes next. That uncertainty brings fear, yes, but also wonder. In backward life, there would be no surprise, no uncertainty. Everything would be known. Would that familiarity become dull? Or would it simply allow us to savor moments more deeply, like rereading a favorite story, not for its twists, but for its textures, its details, its beauty? Perhaps joy in backward time would be quieter, but no less real. Perhaps it would not thrill, but it would soothe. Now let your thoughts drift outward into the stars. In forward life, we dream of exploring the universe, of reaching farther into the unknown. In reverse, exploration would not be expansion, but contraction. Humanity would not scatter into the cosmos, but return to Earth, closer and closer, until all of us are gathered again into a single home. Rockets would not launch, but return. Ships would not venture outward, but fold inward. Technology itself would not progress, but retreat into simplicity. At first, this might feel like loss, but imagine the peace of it, the entire species gathered together, not driven by ambition, but by reunion, not chasing the unknown, but resting in the known. The cosmos itself would feel less like a frontier and more like a cradle. This backward vision also invites a new way of seeing spirituality. In forward life, spirituality often points us toward what comes after death, toward mysteries we cannot yet touch, but in reverse. Death is not an ending, but the beginning of return. Birth itself becomes the final step, a gentle dissolution into silence. Spirituality would not ask us to believe in what we cannot sit, would invite us to be grateful for what we are certain to meet again. Every prayer would be a thank you, every ritual a homecoming, every breath a reminder that we are already being carried. The divine would not be ahead, but behind, waiting for us to arrive once more. And as you let these thoughts drift through you, notice how calm they make you feel. The backward flow of time is not a puzzle to solve, but a lullaby to rest in. It does not demand understanding, only imagination. It does not call for striving, only surrender. Each image, the flower gathering its petals, the mountain rising from dust, the loved one returning to your side wraps you in assurance. Assurance that endings are not final. Assurance that return is woven into the fabric of life. Assurance that you, too, are part of this rhythm. So as you breathe slowly, as your body sinks into the bed, let yourself be carried by that rhythm. Feel each thought dissolve into stillness. Feel each moment fold back into calm. The river of backward time cradles you, not rushing, not straining, but guiding you gently toward beginnings. And in that gentle return, you are safe. You are whole. You are at rest. The more you rest inside this backward vision of time, the more it feels like a great unfolding of calm, as though the world itself is gently rocking you, reminding you that nothing is final and everything comes home again. At first, the idea of time running backward feels strange, like a film rewinding too quickly. But as you linger with it, you begin to see how soothing it becomes. Every unraveling is a healing. Every retreat is a restoration. Every moment is not a loss but a promise of return. Picture once more your own life within this rhythm. In forward time, your story feels like a climb upward, outward, always reaching. Each year adds weight, adds responsibility, adds distance from beginnings. But in backward time, the climb would soften into a descent. Each year would lighten you, returning what was once heavy, releasing what was once burdensome. Imagine carrying a great load up a hill, and then imagine finally walking down, feeling the weight slip away step by step. That is what backward time would be, a life not of burden but of release. Think of aging again. In forward life, age is often feared because it carries us closer to the unknown. We worry about losing health, losing strength, losing memory. But in backward time, age is not loss but gain. The aches vanish, the wrinkles smooth, the steps grow lighter. Memory does not fade but sharpens, not for what is gone but for what is coming. Old age would not be an end, but a season of anticipation, a time of waiting for the return of youth. Imagine looking in the mirror and seeing not decline but renewal. Imagine each day bringing you closer not to frailty but to vitality. How different life would feel if every birthday were a gift of youth, not a step away from it. Families would experience this rhythm in profound ways. Parents would not fear losing their children to independence, but instead feel the joy of watching them grow nearer. The years that in forward life bring separation would in backward life bring reunion. Siblings who drift apart with time would instead draw together, their paths folding into one until childhood is shared again. Grandparents would not be mourned as they pass away, but welcomed as they slowly return, becoming younger, joining the family not as elders but as companions, and eventually as children once more. The generational distance would collapse, not into loneliness, but into intimacy. Even work, with all its struggles and strains, would feel gentler. In forward life, work often feels endless, a series of tasks piling higher, demands that never stop. But in backward life, work would steadily release itself. Responsibilities would loosen, tasks would dissolve. The further back you move, the freer you become. Retirement would not be the conclusion of exhaustion, but the beginning of a return to rest, leisure, and play. Imagine the relief of knowing that every day brings less pressure, not more. Imagine stepping into work each morning knowing it is already unraveling, that the burden is already lifting. Work would not be a race, but a release. Now think again of art and creativity. In forward life, we create to preserve, to capture fleeting moments. We paint, write, compose, build, hoping our creations will last beyond us. In backward life, art would not be about permanence, but impermanence. Paintings would fade into blank canvases, books would dissolve into empty pages, songs would soften into silence. But in that impermanence, there would be a new kind of beauty. Instead of trying to hold on, we would celebrate letting go. The act of unmaking would be as meaningful as making. A blank canvas is not emptiness, is potential. A silence is not nothing, it is presence. Backward art would remind us that beauty is not only in what is built, but also in what is released. The same rhythm would echo in nature. Forests would not thin but thicken. Rivers would not carve but refill. Mountains would not crumble but rise. Animals would not vanish but return. Extinction itself would unravel into abundance. Every species reappearing in its time. Every ecosystem repairing. Itself the earth would not be a place of loss but of restoration. Imagine standing on a hillside, watching not the erosion of soil but its return, watching not the melting of glaciers but their steady rebuilding. The planet itself would breathe in, not out, gathering itself into wholeness. And what of the universe? Beyond, in forward cosmology, everything scatters, galaxies drift apart, stars fade, energy dissipates. But in backward cosmology, everything gathers. Galaxies return toward one another. Stars grow brighter as they contract. Energy condenses into unity. The night sky would not become emptier but fuller, not darker but more radiant. Imagine looking upward and seeing more stars each year, more brilliance, more intimacy. The cosmos itself would feel less like a wilderness and more like a home. The great end of the universe would not be a collapse into nothing, but a return to everything, all light merging into one. This vision of backward time also reshapes spirituality. In forward life, we often look toward what lies ahead, toward mysteries beyond death, toward an unseen future. But in backward time, the mysteries would not be ahead, they would be behind. Death would not be a doorway into the unknown, but a threshold back into beginnings. Faith would not be about what we cannot see, but gratitude for what we already know will return. Spirituality would not be about reaching forward, but about honoring what circles back. Every prayer would be a thank you, every ritual a recognition that nothing is ever truly gone. Perhaps the deepest comfort of this vision lies in how it treats grief. In forward life, grief is sharp because it feels final. A loved one lost will not return. But in backward time, grief is softened by certainty. Every loss is temporary. Every absence is brief. The one you miss is already on their way back to you. Every farewell contains its greeting. Imagine lying awake, missing someone you loved, and instead of despair, feeling peace. You know the river is carrying them closer. You know the moment of reunion is ahead. Grief would not be an ache, it would be anticipation. As you rest with this thought tonight, notice how it quiets the mind. There is no rush in backward time, no pressure, no fear of endings. Everything is safe, everything returns, even now. In forward time, we catch glimpses of this truth. The sun sets, but it rises again. Winter comes, but spring follows. Sleep takes us, but morning restores us. Cycles remind us that return is already woven into life. Backward time is only a dream, but the comfort it gives is real. So let yourself drift into that comfort now. Feel your day unwinding, every word folding back, every step retracing, every thought dissolving. Let your breath carry you, not forward into worry, but backward into peace. Let your body sink, let your mind soften, let your spirit rest. You are not racing into the unknown. You are returning to what is already familiar, already safe, already whole. And in that return, you are at peace. The longer you rest within this backward vision of time, the more it feels like the entire universe has slowed into a lull, a cradle gently rocking you into peace. The strange becomes familiar, the unfamiliar becomes comforting. You begin to see that reversing time is not only about imagining a different sequence of events, but about shifting the way we hold life itself. It is about seeing every ending as a beginning, every loss as a return, every silence as a song still playing in reverse. Think of relationships once more. In forward life, we love with urgency. We cling tightly to people, knowing time threatens to carry them away. We fear goodbyes because we believe they are permanent. But in backward time, urgency dissolves. There is no need to cling because nothing is lost forever. The people you love are already returning, already moving closer, already finding their way back. Imagine the peace of holding someone's hand, not with the fear that one day it will slip away, but with the quiet joy of knowing that even if it does, it will return. Love would not be a desperate grasp, but a gentle presence. It would be less about possession and more about recognition. Even the way we see childhood and parenthood would transform. In forward life, parents raise children and eventually let them go. There is pride, but also sorrow in that letting go. In backward life, the opposite happens. Parents would watch their children return, slowly growing smaller, freer, lighter, until they are gathered once more in arms. The family home would not empty but fill, not scatter but converge. Generations would not spread apart but collapse gently into one. Imagine the comfort of knowing that family does not dissolve with time but gathers closer with every passing year. The ache of separation would vanish, replaced by the calm of reunion. Friendship, too, would feel different. In forward time, friends meet, grow close, share years, and often drift apart. In backward time, drifting apart would never be the end. The further you move, the closer you become again. Strangers would slowly become companions. Conversations would deepen into laughter. And then one day you would experience the joy of meeting them for the first time, which is really the last. Every friendship would be a circle, not a line. Every connection would be a loop, not a break. Now let your thoughts wander to art again. In forward life, art is created as a way to fight against time. We paint to capture beauty before it fades. We write to preserve stories before they are forgotten. We compose music to hold on to feelings that would otherwise vanish. In backward time, art would not need to fight against time. Beauty does not fade, it returns. Stories do not vanish, they reappear. Music does not disappear, it rewinds. Imagine a song that does not end but slowly unravels into silence. A silence that is not empty but full, because it contains the promise of the song returning again. Imagine a painting whose colors fade, stroke by stroke, until the canvas is blank, but the blankness is not loss, it is anticipation. In backward time, art would not be about preservation, but about release. Not about holding on, but about letting go with grace. This same rhythm would echo through nature. Picture a forest fire, in forward time trees collapsing, flames devouring, smoke filling the sky. In backward time, that destruction would soften. Smoke would return to the flames, flames to sparks, sparks to stillness. Trees would rise again, branches lifting, leaves regathering. The forest would not be an emblem of fragility, but of resilience, endlessly restoring itself. Picture a storm in forward life, lightning tearing through the night, thunder shaking. The ground in backward life, lightning would retreat into clouds, thunder folding into silence. Storms would not explode, but dissolve. Even the most violent forces of nature would carry peace in their unraveling. And the cosmos, what a vision that would be. In forward time, we often speak of the universe cooling, scattering, fading into darkness. But in backward time, the universe would warm, gather, intensify. Galaxies would drift inward, stars would glow brighter, light would increase instead of decrease. The night sky would not grow emptier but fuller, a dome of brilliance expanding with every passing year. Imagine lying on your back, looking upward, and seeing more stars each night, the heavens growing denser, more radiant, more alive. The universe itself would feel less like a vast emptiness and more like a great embrace. Everything drawing closer, everything returning to unity. This backward flow would also change the way we feel about loss. In forward time, grief cuts deeply, because it feels final. A loved one dies, and we ache because we cannot follow them. But in backward time, grief would carry no despair. Death would not be the end, but the start of the return. You would watch as absence grew smaller each day, until presence returned. The person you missed would not remain gone. They would come back, slowly, surely, inevitably. Imagine the comfort of this certainty, the way it would soothe the heart. Grief would still exist, but it would not wound. It would be more like longing before a reunion. The gentle ache of waiting for something sweet you know is already on its way. And what about the meaning of life itself? In forward time, meaning is often tied to ambition, to building, to leaving a mark. We live with the sense that our time is limited, so we must do something with it. But in backward time, the urgency of achievement would vanish. Life would not be about building, but about returning. Purpose would not be about reaching, but about releasing. Perhaps this would shift the focus from doing to being, from striving to noticing, from ambition to gratitude. In a back world, the most meaningful thing might not be what you create, but how you let it go. Not what you achieve, but how you rest inside the rhythm of return. Even spirituality would feel transformed. In forward life, many people place their hope in the future hope of heaven, of peace, of transcendence. But in backward life, the sacred would not be ahead but behind. Death would not be a gateway into the unknown, but a passage into beginnings. The divine would not be something we reach for, but something we return to. Faith would not be a question, but a recognition, not about trusting what you cannot see, but being grateful for what you already know will come again. As you rest in this thought tonight, let it sink into you. Let it calm the restless parts of your mind. Imagine your life not as a race against time, but as a gentle return carried by time. Imagine every loss as temporary, every sorrow as fleeting, every ending as only the start of a reunion. Imagine the entire world not as something fragile, but as something endlessly resilient, endlessly restoring itself. Breathe slowly now. Feel the current of backward time carry you. Let each thought unwind. Let each worry dissolve. Let each burden lift. You are not rushing toward an uncertain tomorrow. You are floating back into the safety of yesterday. The river cradles you, and in that cradle you are safe. You are whole. You are at peace as you drift with this backward vision one last time. Let yourself notice the way it has settled into you. At first, it may have seemed like a thought experiment, a curious puzzle, something to stretch the imagination. But now, after lingering with it, it feels more like a gentle song that has been playing all along, a rhythm your heart has always known but rarely paused to hear. The world flowing backward is not only a reversal of events, is a reminder of cycles, of returns, of the deep truth that nothing is ever truly lost. Picture once more your own life within this rhythm. Imagine your days gently unwinding, each word folding back into silence, each meal returning to its plate, each step retracing its path. Imagine your responsibilities dissolving, your worries fading, your burdens lifting. You grow lighter, freer, closer to innocence with every passing day. Life is not a climb into uncertainty, but a descent into familiarity. You are not rushing forward, you are floating back, 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 into beginnings. Think again of your relationships. Loved ones do not drift away, they return. Friends do not fade into distance, they draw near. Families do not scatter, they converge. Every goodbye is softened by the certainty of reunion. Every loss is carried by the promise of return. Even grief is not despair, but anticipation. The ache of longing becomes the sweetness of waiting for what you know will come again. In backward time, love is never threatened, never fragile, never fleeting. It is constant, certain, woven into the very fabric of the universe. The world around you shares this same rhythm. Forests regrow, rivers refill, skies clear, oceans restore. Mountains rise, stars brighten, galaxies gather. The earth itself breathes. In, not out. The cosmos itself becomes a cradle, not a frontier. Instead of scattering into coldness, the universe folds into warmth. Instead of fading into silence, it gathers into light. The end is not an ending, but a homecoming. And as you look upward, you see not emptiness, but fullness, not loss, but return. In such a world, even meaning itself changes. In forward life, we live with urgency, always striving to achieve, to build, to leave a mark before time runs out. But, in backward life, there is no rush, no scarcity, no fear of endings. Purpose is not about what you create, but about how you return. Meaning is not about ambition, but about presence. The most important thing is not what you accomplish, but how. You notice, how you savor, how you rest inside the rhythm of restoration. To live backward is to live with gratitude, to see every moment not as fleeting, but as promised. Spirituality, too, takes on this softness. In forward time, faith often points ahead, asking us to trust in what comes after death, in mysteries we cannot see, but in backward time, faith points behind, reminding us that death is not a wall, but a doorway into beginnings. The divine is not distant, but familiar, not ahead, but within. Prayer becomes not a request for what might come, but a thank you for what is certain to return. The sacred is not in what lies beyond, but in what continually comes back. And yet, as comforting as this vision is, it does not erase the beauty of forward time. Perhaps that is its final gift, not to replace the life we know, but to deepen it. For even in our forward-flowing world, we catch glimpses of this backward rhythm. We see it in the rising of the sun after night, in the blooming of spring after winter, in the way sleep restores us each night, in the way love returns in new forms. Cycles already surround us, already remind us that endings are not absolute. To imagine backward time is to listen more closely to those cycles, to let them calm us, to let them reassure us. So, as this journey comes to its close, let yourself rest inside the comfort it has given. You do not need to solve the paradox. You do not need to prove the science. You only need to feel the peace of it, the sense that nothing is lost, that everything returns, that the river of time, whether forward or backward, always carries you where you need to go. Now breathe slowly. Feel your body soften. Feel thoughts quiet. The day is unwinding, the night is cradling you, and time itself is folding around you like a blanket. You are not rushing into an unknown future, you are returning to the safety of beginnings. You are being carried gently, steadily, lovingly, back to the place where all things start, and in that return, you are safe, you are whole, you are at peace. Rest now, and let the river carry you.